How to thread the Viking sewing machine. First off, the Viking sewing machine takes a flat bobbin, so if you squeeze the bobbin here, it should feel like a flat surface. This is called a 15J bobbin. So we're going to load our bobbin into the machine. You're going to take the bobbin plate cover off. If you look carefully at the cover plate, you can see there's a tiny diagram, but of course they did it in white on a clear background, so you can hardly see it. So we want to feed our bobbin into the machine with the thread going counterclockwise, so it feeds off the top of the spool. I'm going to place this into the throat plate of the machine, and then I'm going to catch it on this tiny little thread guide right here. It's so small you can hardly see it. I call it like a hairpin. It's that small. So we want to make sure it's inserted into that tiny little slit, and then just lay it to the back of the machine. And then I'm going to close my bobbin case. So I'm going to close my bobbin case cover. Okay, so now that's the bobbin thread or bottom thread. I'm going to thread the top part of the machine. So here's the spool pin. I'm going to put the thread onto the spool pin, and I'm going to put this cap on the end. This is necessary so when you sew, the thread doesn't shoot off the side of the machine. Let me move this so you can see. There's a thread guide on the very top, so I'm going to catch it in this very top thread guide right here. It just kind of lays into there. I don't need this screw head at all. That's for winding the bobbin. We're not doing that right now. I'm going to come down. I'm going to come back up. I'm going to go to the right. Now, right now, I can't see the silver thread take-up lever. So I'm going to hand crank my wheel. The only way I can crank it, it should go in a counterclockwise motion, so in the come on over motion. Never turn it the other direction. So I'm going to turn this until my silver take-up lever comes to the top of the machine so I can see it. Okay, so now I'm going to thread it right to left like a U-turn. It doesn't like to catch. I like to make sure it catches. Put your finger on the top thread here and kind of pull gently, and you can see it's caught in this little hole. Now I'm going to drop down. I want to focus in so we can see really well. Okay, so now I need to thread. There's a tiny little thread guide that we can't even see here. So let's see if I can bring it closer. This little thread guide right here. So it's shaped like a L. I can actually just invert the thread into it. I don't have to thread it like a needle. There it went in. And now I'm going to thread my needle front to back through that little hole. I'm going to be super, super careful that when I thread it, I don't twist the thread by pulling it too quickly. So let's see how, that's as close as I can zoom in. If you're having trouble threading your needle, cut the tip off so you don't have a frayed edge there. I'm going to put my presser foot lever down, and now I'm going to thread it front to back. And this is where you have to pull nice and slow. If I pull it too quickly, the thread will twist around the needle. Okay, so now I'm going to pick my presser foot lever back up. I'm going to loop the thread now. So in order to loop it, I need to hold this top thread nice and still. And I'm going to hand crank. And it did wrap around here. Hang on. So this is exactly what I don't want you to have happen. So I'm going to unloop it. There we go. So I knew that because it wouldn't pull very nicely, so I wanted to fix that. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my hand crank wheel once again in the only motion that I can. Come on over, come on over. So I'm going to turn it this direction. In order to do that, in order to make it loop, I have to hold the top thread in my left hand and do not let it go. So I'm holding it in my left hand and I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to put my needle in and then out of the machine I'll actually see it loop in the throat plate, and I'll gently pull it. When it completes the revolution, the bobbin thread will come up through the center of the throat plate. So let's see if I can get in closer there so you can see it. So you can see that thread right there. So this bobbin thread I threaded is coming up through the throat plate on the sewing machine. Do not let this thread go. Hold it taut. I'm going to shimmy the scissor underneath, and now my thread's coming up through the bottom, and then I'm going to put both my threads into this tiny slit on the presser foot. Send my threads to the back of the machine. Now I do want to give you a word of caution. If you're sewing, I'm going to use this for a test fabric. To sew, you want to line up your your fabric with the 5/8 inch mark on the sewing machine. So if you look very carefully at the sewing machine, there's a measurement guide on here. So sometimes we'll sew at 1/4 an inch, which would be parallel to the edge of the presser foot. Most times you're going to sew at 5/8 of an inch. So what that means is when you put your fabric in the machine, you want to line it up with the 5/8 inch mark. So I'm going to put it right there, put my presser foot lever down. Okay, so now that we've got that, when I go to stitch, I have to very carefully press on the foot pedal, which is like a gas pedal, and I'm going to sew. I'm going to guide the fabric, but I'm not going to hold the fabric still. I'm just going to gently guide it. To back stitch, on this machine you'll hit this button and it'll send the back stitch in the opposite direction. So we don't need that many back stitches. 1 or 2 is fine, and that acts like tying a knot in the fabric. To release it from the machine, you want to pull it. Now it's stuck. So in order to get it unstuck, I'm going to turn my hand crank wheel once again, just a tiny little bit, only in the direction that I can turn it, which is counterclockwise. And I just want to release it enough so that I can pull the fabric out of the machine. When I'm cutting the threads, this is super important on the machines. You want to leave it like 6 or 7 inches long. You want to relax the thread and then cut closer to your fabric. And then again, send your threads to the back of the machine. Okay, that's it for the Viking sewing machine.